Welcome in. We're the Real Selection Committee. I'm Mike. This is Greg. And this is a reaction video of today's panel selecting the top 12 teams in. So how do you think they did?
Well, we believe they got the right 12 teams in without a question. I give them an A+ on the selection of the teams. Now the seedings are kind of different than what we had when we did our thing last night. But, I mean, overall, we can't complain too awful much about it. It looks like some good matchups. So.
Right. Like you said, the 12 teams are correct. Seedings are a little bit different. The one things that stick out to me is what the panel did here with the Clemson SMU game. Clemson beat them and they're behind them. So this head-to-head matchup thing here, what were they thinking there is the question.
Well, apparently they went away from the head-to-head matchups and went with how they had them ranked going into the weekend. And if a team was higher ranked, even if they fell a little bit because of a loss, they stayed above. So it looks like they kind of went with record and rankings as opposed to head-to-head. Now, we had talked about the Ohio State-Penn State thing because Penn State had to play an extra game. And even though we do have the head-to-head with Ohio State beating Penn State, we would have kind of been okay if they flip-flopped them because we didn't want to necessarily penalize Penn State. But head-to-head should matter. You know, last year they projected. This year you had head-to-head and they avoided that, so that's the one thing you could knock them for. But really, they did a good job.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I think they stuck to their guns as far as what they said when they said coming into this championship week, the teams that lost the championship game were not going to fall very far from where they were, other than they had to swap them out because they lost in the championship game because the teams that won were awarded their buys.
Right.
So kudos for sticking with that.
Right.
It is questionable, like you said, the head-to-head matchup, you know, is a big deal, you think, coming in to this, but nevertheless, I think they did a great job with that.
I would question the SMU being ahead of Clemson as well, but hey, you know, they had tough decisions to make, and they were going to get ridiculed a little bit on some of them, but overall, we agree with it.
Yeah. So let's just talk about these 4 teams that are on the bye. Number 1 overall is not even a question or a debate here. Oregon's the only team in the FBS that's undefeated.
Yep.
So they deserve the number 1. Number 2 is Georgia. We think is the second best team in this 12-team playoffs. Tough schedule. They played all season long. They're battle tested as far as being able to come from behind, win games, play overtime, win games. SEC's without a doubt probably the toughest conference.
Top to bottom, absolutely it is.
And then here's where we were kind of not sure who they were going to select. Arizona was the lowest seeding team, but the Big 12 you think was a better power conference. But they went ahead and they put Boise in the 3 hole because they were seated higher, is what I'm thinking that they went with. They were seated higher coming into these games. They won, they got the job done. I'm not really going to complain too much. I think Boise State should be in these playoffs, and they had a great resume here. They only lost 1 game, and that was to Oregon.
Yeah, Boise State's proven they can step outside of their conference and compete with just about anybody. I truly felt that Arizona State should jump them. I think Arizona State is the better team, but Boise State has proven that they can step outside the Mountain West and compete with the big dogs. So to your point, I mean, that doesn't bother me all that much, even though if it were me, I'd have Arizona State 3 and Boise 4.
Right. Well, Arizona State is the hottest team coming in. They've really had to rip off some wins to get into these playoffs here, and they did. They beat all the top tier teams in the Big 12, so they were rewarded in a sense as getting a bye and getting the 4 seed here.
And oddly enough, the Big 12, which ended up with 3 10-2 teams, only got 1 team in the playoffs.
Right. Yeah. Yep. So now we're going to look ahead and some of the matchups, like we spoke earlier. Some of those we think they kind of got wrong, but hey, you can't complain. At least they got the right teams in.
Yes.
The one thing that stands out to me and you was how Clemson is behind SMU when they won the championship and beat that team, the head-to-head.
Yeah, that's a shocker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love the fact that SMU got in. I think they're deserving of being in, and we'll touch on that a little bit later in the show. But, you know, that's a little shocking. But, hey, you know, like we said, tough decisions need to be made.
Right, right. Okay, so let's talk about the games, right? First game we'll talk about is Texas is going to play Clemson. Well, actually, Clemson's traveling to Texas to play because the highest seeded teams got the home games. So, right here's a good matchup. How do you think this is going to play out here?
Clemson and Texas, here's two blue blood programs. Over the years, two perennial powers. I think Texas is going to be the team to win this game, but hey, we counted Clemson out a few weeks ago, and there they are, right there. So can't count anyone out. Going to be a good one.
Right. Yep. So right now, as projections they have as far as the spread here is Texas is favored by 10.5 points. It's a pretty big spread for these teams here to be playing each other.
Yeah, well, I think they might have bought in a little to the 5 versus 12 factor on that. We'll see. I mean, realistically, getting beat by 11 points isn't really getting blown out either. So we'll see what happens. Right.
Yep. So now let's talk about the other matchup here. We got Penn State is playing SMU. That's a pretty interesting matchup. Now you got a Texas team traveling all the way up to Pennsylvania. Weather might play in a big role into this game here. We'll see how SMU plays in the cold.
Very much could. We got this as a 6 versus 11. The winner of this will feed in against Boise State. As you said, it's definitely going to be chilly, cold in Pennsylvania on this night. However, it does snow in Dallas. We've seen on Thanksgiving Day games for the Cowboys, it does snow in Texas. So maybe they're not as foreign to the snow, but the one thing I noticed watching SMU, they look a little bit on the smallish side. So that could factor in them coming into Big Ten country and playing a Big Ten team.
Yeah, right. So right now the point spread on this game is Penn State is favored by 8.5 points. I think Penn State's deserving of that spread right now. Yeah. They looked really good in this game against Oregon, this championship game. They kind of proved to the people out there that this offense can move the ball and put up some points. So this is going to be a fun matchup.
Well, I would warn people, this is a game that, we kind of talked a little bit. It looks like this could be a blowout. I would warn you, SMU looked pretty good last night against a tough Clemson team. So let's just let it play out.
Yeah. So the thing I was thinking too is that, Penn State fell in front of Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame took that 7 seed. They're going to host Indiana. This is an in-state rival game right here. This is going to be a fun matchup here. They're both kind of the same team. They run scores up on the teams they played. And, of course, Notre Dame's had the worst loss in these 12 teams here, losing to Northern Illinois, but they righted the ship and they've blown out everybody they've played so far.
Yeah, well, here's what I would ask. You know how in the past we've heard, especially from some of the bigger schools, well, it was early in the season. Are we going to give Notre Dame the same pass? Hey, that was a bad loss. It was the worst loss by far of any team in the playoffs. And even of some of the teams that were just on the outskirts of the playoffs. But since that game, Notre Dame has just blown everybody else off the field. They've certainly looked like a top 5 team in the country, and they're going to be a force to reckon with. Now, it is interesting that they're playing Indiana, a team that kind of mimics them.
Yeah.
Indiana has blown everybody they've played off the field, except for the Ohio State game that got away from them a little bit. Mm-hmm. But that team deserves to be in because they took care of the Big Ten Conference teams they played, and the games were not in doubt. Yeah. So that it is what it is, folks. I think that's gonna be an exciting game.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be an electric game. I think both of these offenses are gonna move the ball around up and down the field. It's gonna be a high scoring game, I think. Right now the over-under is 52.5. And Notre Dame's favored right now by 8.5.
Right.
It's going to be an interesting matchup, these two in-state guys.
One thing that might play for Indiana's favor is having played the Buckeyes when the Buckeyes were on, they've seen what a team looks like when they're hitting on all cylinders. Mm-hmm. It didn't work out for them that game, but that was the first real big game that team played. Will they be better this time against a team you know is probably going to be hitting on all cylinders?
Yeah. So let's move on to the last game, which is probably the best matchup game here. Is going to be Ohio State 8 versus number 9 Tennessee. This seems like the perfect matchup right here. These two teams are so close in talent and just a great matchup here. It's going to be fun watch Tennessee coming into Columbus. What an atmosphere there. There's going to be 110,000 people going crazy for this game.
Two teams that feel like they should be better higher seeds or lower seeds, however you want to look at it, be close to the 4, 5, 6 seed teams. Mm-hmm. But they're sitting there at that 8-9 game. It's going to be an exciting game. Both teams better bring their lunches. Both teams better bring their A games if they want to win this game. That is going to be an exciting game as well.
Yeah, right. So right now, early projections or early line is Ohio State's favored by 7.5. I mean, this is going to be a pretty interesting matchup. You know, you got the Big Ten versus the SEC here.
Here we go.
Hey, they got probably the hardest path because if the winner of this game is going to go and play Oregon, so it doesn't get any easier from this pass in that 8 and 9 hole. So,
and if I'm not mistaken, they've got Texas and Arizona State, Clemson as the other 3 teams in that bracket. So this is pretty much loaded with blue blood type teams.
Yeah. So to me, I really want to stress that I think this panel did a great job as far as selecting these teams, sticking to the structure, sticking to their guns, and not getting into, well, this team's going to bring in more money. The bias of this team can beat this team. Yeah. You didn't do it in your regular schedule. Why should you be honored into the playoffs just because of who you are, right? Well, you know, win the games and you get into this tournament. That's what you have to do. That's what all these 12 teams have done. That's why they're in there. I think the panel hit it out of the park as far as getting the right teams in. Maybe the seeding is a little subjective, but hey, I'm not going to complain. I think they set up a great tournament here.
Well, like I had mentioned about the SMU, losses, people thinking maybe they don't belong. Well, the reason this team is out is 2 of their losses come to 6 and 6 teams. One of them by a 24-3 count. That is why that team is sitting there and not in the playoffs.
Yeah.
They got the wins, right? Mm-hmm. SMU lost 2 games, both of them by field goal. And we just saw the championship game. They lost in the last seconds to Clemson. ACC, not the Conference USA, Power 4 conference. Folks, it is what it is. If you're an Alabama fan, hey, you got a terrific team.
Yeah.
If they had won one of those 2 games, the 2 games they lost in the 6 and 16, they're in.
Yeah.
And the same we could say for Ole Miss. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Miami and Florida. Don't blow a 21-0 lead against Syracuse, a team you should have beat. Yeah. Now it's not a hands-down win, but that's why those teams are sitting out and all these teams are in, because these teams took care of business. Clemson's only in there because they won the ACC.
Right.
So, and that was part of it. Win your conference. Top 5 conference champions are in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I love the structure. I think it is rewarding these teams for getting into these championship games. That's what they're fighting for. That's what they're playing for. Hey, win games. That's what it all boils down to.
That's right.
I'm looking forward to these playoff games here. This is going to be the funnest, I think, college football season ever with this. The panel did a great job. So now we got 2 weeks until the first round kicks off. It's December 20th. So next weekend, we're going to probably dive deeper into these matchups. We're going to have, predictions. Who do we think is going to move on and advance to the next round? And then we'll even touch on some of the other bowl games to see, where some of these other teams that didn't make it in, to these top 12,
Yeah.
see what kind of matchups they got there and predict some of those games. It's going to be fun.
Oh.
So stick around. Hey, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. That's real easy to do. Please comment. We love to hear from anybody.
Yeah.
Hey, let us know what you think, why you think they're there or not there. Hey, but we appreciate it. Talk to you next time. Peace.
Peace.